Good J in London. All right. I actually travel back to Jamaica tomorrow. I've been here since December, but I was in Jamaica, in Kingston actually during Hurricane Melissa. But you know, we have family. My family has family on my father's side in Black River, and you know, our hearts went out so much to those folks over there who went through living hell with this storm. I can't see the screen. I can see my screen. Normally, I'd like to be able to talk in front of the screen, but in this instance, I'm not going to be able to do that. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. All right. Okay, so I have 37 slides here, so that's going to be something like 30 seconds a slide or something like that. So, and they're not particularly architectural slides, they're more kind of factual slides. Some of them are a little bit more architectural. What I want to do is basically talk about what the lessons are for Jamaica's built heritage future as a result of this particular hurricane. And so let me get to it. So the hard truths from this hurricane are that hurricanes are becoming more frequent, unpredictable, and stronger, and that prevention versus costly rebuild is going to be the equation that we have to look at. We have to learn from that. The image that I've put up here basically is an aerial view of the center of Falmouth with the courthouse on the right-hand side. I was involved, and by the way, I have to put my hands up. I used to be a trustee of the Jamaican National Heritage Trust, and I'm still on the technical committee of the Jamaican National Heritage Trust, trying very hard to get them to do what needs to be done in the face of very, very few funds. So there's a context as to why some of the vulnerabilities that we have are there. So the storm, Melissa, and I don't know when we're going to come up with the idea that we don't name hurricanes after people, particularly ladies. It does cause a problem. We're really going to have to work that out. But it was a Category 5 hurricane, 185 mile an hour sustained winds, 250 mile an hour gusts, up to 18 to 24 inches of rainfall, 9+ feet of storm surge, it has surpassed Hurricane Gilbert in 1988, and was matched by some Labor Day hurricane in Florida, which had the same statistics. The area in red is essentially the path that basically, when the hurricane decided that it was going to go across the island, that is the path that it actually took from southwest to northeast.
Sorry, that's between the two red zigzag lines.
Yeah. The two red zigzag lines there. That is basically parts of Manchester and St. Elizabeth, parts of Westmoreland in the south, and then going up St. James and Trelawney, and then it went to visit Cuba. So Westmoreland, St. Elizabeth, St. James, Trelawney, Hannibal, those were all the ones badly hit. But in heritage terms, St. Elizabeth and Trelawney are the ones that really devastated that. Just an idea of what Black River looked like after the hurricane. I don't have a before image, but believe me, there was a lot more green, in both of these images before Melissa. In many respects, this was the perfect storm because a year before, Hurricane Beryl came along and caused a great amount of devastation. Interestingly, Hurricane Beryl actually led to repairs being done to a number of buildings, which strengthened them against Hurricane Melissa. But of course, the track that Hurricane Melissa took was a different path to Hurricane Beryl took was a different path to Melissa. We also had a general election in 2025, And then along came Hurricane Melissa. So the last thing we really needed was Jamaica's biggest, costliest natural disaster this century, in more than a century. And I've said here that people are generally wary and very keen for stability and anxious to move on with their lives. And you know, I cannot portray to you what people in Black River and the West and other parts of Jamaica have suffered during this storm, which was traumatic for them and impacted an enormous amount of livelihoods as well. So we have, in terms of statistics, about somewhere around 54 lives lost. I think it's probably climbed a little bit now. 900,000 people were affected. 25,000 people were displaced initially. 90 shelters still operating. The subsequent diseases, particularly leptospirosis, led to additional deaths. And Caribbean-wide, there are over 100 deaths as a result of Melissa. The scale of destruction of 4.8 million tons of debris, 180,000 truckloads of refuse that were blocking roads, schools, hospitals, and markets. The key impacted areas, of course, were economic activity, health and safety, livelihoods, infrastructure, cultural activity, environmental stability, and heritage and patrimony, of course, which is the subject of what we're talking about. Economic impact is assumed to be somewhere between 8.8 and 10 billion US dollars, which is about 30 to 41% of Jamaica's GDP, and about only $4 billion of insured losses. So there's an enormous loss to tourism, to agriculture, about 40 to 50% of hotels damaged in that zone, and the expected recovery is between 3 to 5 years, according to the Planning Institute of Jamaica. So quite devastating, and of course this comes on the backbone of Melissa, of Beryl, which also caused an enormous amount of loss. So for health and safety, again, the deaths, hospital damages. Black River Hospital was one of the first buildings actually that suffered damage to its roof and let in water and so on. And of course the subsequent health problems with waterborne diseases and garbage on the streets and so on. But also the trauma and mental health that I spoke about earlier. My family in Black River, they went through absolute living hell with roofs coming off and that kind of thing. My cousin lived on Crane Road, which is the roadway that runs along the coast going east from Black River, and that particular corridor was absolutely devastated. Storm surged 9 feet. So Black River really was the eastern epicenter, if you like, eastern eye wall. As I was talking to Mr. Maitland earlier, and then areas around White House, along the western eye wall, and it's the eye wall really that caused so many problems with the winds in particular. In terms of livelihoods, agriculture, vending on markets, transportation, education, all of these things were severely impacted, particularly in that part of the island, and are still suffering the effects of Melissa. Anybody who has ever been to Black River and strolled through the streets, the high street in Black River, believe me, there's very, very little going on there now. Every single building was devastated. The sea came straight through the southern shops and devastated many of them. It's a difficult thing. In terms of infrastructure, 156,000 structures damaged, 120,000 roofs destroyed, 24,000 total losses to buildings. Many of those small residences, 77% are without electricity at its peak in the affected area. Roads and bridges washed away, and impassable water systems severely disrupted, and communications, 241 communities cut off. Of course, that was in October. The picture is improving daily, and the question is, with this improvement, and this is why I want to come back to this, is that with this improvement in the situation, what happens during the next hurricane, and particularly in relation to heritage? Are we simply trying to get back to regular order without building in resilience? In terms of cultural activity, of course, entertainment, many concert venues destroyed, the Great River Showground unrecognizable, sports facilities ruined. Social activities, of course, were dramatically impacted. Community gathering places lost, particularly churches, community centers. Social fabric was disrupted. Travel and tourism, of course, Thanks to International was closed for a few weeks. Holland Bamboo, which is in the photograph you're looking at, the famous Bamboo Avenue, of course, it is resurging. It is coming back very quickly. Master God is doing his work out there. So many of our very denuded and leafless forests are slowly coming back to life. Environmental stability, disrupted. Tree cover, crops and soils, mangroves, coastline, wildlife, all of these impacted. I was in Treasure Beach a few weeks after, and they were still finding crocodiles which had, for some reason, found their way into unfamiliar territory. And again, these are slowly stabilizing, but again, the question is, how are we preparing for the next potential hurricane season, which is in 5 months' time? In terms of built patrimony and heritage, 40 plus heritage structures damaged or destroyed. A significant portion of Jamaica's 320 declared national monuments are in the hardest hit parishes. Falmouth is one of the best preserved Georgian towns in the Caribbean, and suffered quite a lot of damage. Baptismans, the courthouse roof, and many other residences as well. The image that you're looking at on the right there is what is left of St. John's Church, which we will look at that a little bit more later. In terms of of churches, I mean, this is one of the incredible things, is that we've lost so many churches. Hundreds of churches have been damaged. I wouldn't say flattened. I think one of the things that we have to be careful of. We've got reports coming back of churches being lost, of buildings being demolished and devastated, when in actual fact, roofs gone, and in fact, roof coverings were gone. So the language, one has to be very careful with the language that is used. And we really do need to be sort of glass half full when we're talking about heritage, because one of the things that particularly this country teaches is that, and many other European and other societies which are quite prepared to reconstruct buildings which apparently are gone, but in fact are all of the evidence to rebuild them is still there. The ones that I've mentioned here, St. John's Anglican Church, of course, in Black River, Ramble, which I saw with my own eyes, which is really, Ramble is gone. Very, very sadly so. William the Baptist Church in Falmouth is badly damaged. St. Peter's Anglican Church in Falmouth has lost parts of its roof. Moravian Church in Eastern Spring, reduced to ruins. There are others in Lacovia. The Anglican church that my grandmother worshipped at in Catadupa in St. James lost its roof, and many others. Historic schools and public buildings. Manning's High School, I was working through the Heritage Trust with the Manning's Old Boys to try and restore Manning's High School. It went through many hurricanes, including Beryl, and this one just decided that it was going to knock it flat to the ground. And so the aerial view of Manning's High School on the top there. The bottom image is the Black River Courthouse, which again has lost its upper floor. Nocalva Agricultural School, Cornwall College, all of those are damaged. So quite a lot of devastation to a lot of historic buildings and monuments. Living heritage, of course, as well. I mean, the amount of our valuable ecosystems, the ones that I've highlighted here are Accompong Ruins, Rastafari, Indigenous Village, and Seafoot Town, had damage, had loss. There were many other natural systems like YS, but YS is now, YS Falls is now back up. The mangroves, again, mangroves in Crane Road in Black River, badly damaged. But again, a lot of these environmental systems are resilient, and thankfully so. But we must play our part in ensuring that they are not put to the point where they're unrecoverable. In terms of building types affected, of course, residential. I mean, 156,000 residences damaged, including great houses and small houses. 24,000 total loss. I mean, in a country like Jamaica, that's just enormous. I myself drove through White House, which is to the west of Bluefields, heading towards Savlamar, and I was absolutely shocked to see how many people lived up in the hills above White House. I had no idea, and there was so much tree cover. And a lot of these, and again, it highlights the issue that we have with land distribution and land tenure, that people very often live on very marginal locations, possibly the land that they don't own, so they build very simply. And this is one of the issues that really we have to confront with our residential housing stock, is how to build resiliently when people are having problems with land tenure. Of course, in commercial terms, markets, shops, hotels, enormous quantity, 40 to 50% of hotels damaged in the parishes affected. 721 schools damaged in the area, as a result of the hurricane. And of course, we've looked at churches of every denomination, hundreds impacted across multiple parishes. And the key issue I've highlighted here is that many roofs built in many cases with minimal to almost no professional input, and lack of maintenance made damage more extensive, but more importantly, a lot of professional input in maintenance was just not there. And it's something that I want to highlight, is that maintenance is a thing that here in this country, maintenance is almost more important than what you build. Maintaining it and upgrading it is important. In Jamaica, unfortunately, we have a different approach. We want to build things that really don't require maintenance, it seems to me. One cannot say it's an institutionalized approach, but it is just a fact that is the way that we have approached the issue. In terms of response and assessment, I just wanted to highlight here that one of the things that's happening at the moment is this assessment phase. I mean, there was the response phase, and obviously that involved a huge number of agencies, international and local. The Planning Institute coordinated many of them. The UN had many agencies. The World Bank, IMF, UNESCO, and other UN agencies. The EU, the Red Cross, World Food Program, Food for the Poor, World Central Kitchen, all of them were involved in response, in trying to get water supplies up, food, to clear roads, to basically bring temporary relief in terms of shelter and so on. Map Action, whose maps I've used a few here, NOAA also. The Heritage Trust has done assessments in coordination with UNESCO. The UK has provided technical and financial assistance. The US has also done so. And there's a UN appeal of about 74 million requested so far. One of the problems that we had following the storm was severe problems with security. And I remember driving to Black River, and it took about 6 hours to get from Kingston to Black River, something that normally takes about 2.5. And one of the reasons was, of course, that the roads were impassable. But one of the things also was that people were lobbying along the road for help, for assistance. And in many cases, in some cases, this became a little bit anxious and aggressive because people, of course, were without food, without shelter. They hadn't, they've been sleeping outdoors and so on. So I remember going back to Black River a few weeks after the hurricane and seeing, more police than people. So there's been an enormous response from the security forces following that initial couple of weeks. And one of the big issues, of course, has been JPS, which is the Jamaica Public Service Company, is the private entity which basically controls all of the network and the production capacity for electricity, which got severely damaged. And of course, if you see, which I don't have here, aerial views of that part of the world, of part of Jamaica after, it was absolute darkness. And in fact, a week before I came here in December, I drove through Newmarket in St. Elizabeth, and it was about dusk, and everybody was out on the street. There was no light at all in the town, and the roads were all flooded. And it was just a surreal thing to understand that these people have to live with this sort of situation. So we do need to build resilience. So in terms of a framework for recovery, there's the impact and analysis, what next, the recovery and lessons learned. I want to highlight the case of St. John's Church in Black River at this point, really just to kind of talk a little bit about one particular building, which Peregrine mentioned, St. John's Church in Black River. In 2023, we were called in to look at St. John's, and it was basically because there had been some settlement which was obvious to the organ loft, and Peregrine happened to be in Jamaica at the time, and we were sort of called in to look at it and try and decide what we were going to do. This is 2023, burial was in 2024. And we were sort of coming up with sort of ideas, but basically what we agreed is that the first thing we needed to do was to really do a survey of the building and try and understand what the structural demands were. But you can see from these images, particularly the one in the middle that we're talking about, the Parish Church, which is really iconic with this beautiful organ. In 2024, Beryl comes along and damages many of the windows, and the church committee was then focused very, very heavily on repairing the damage from Beryl, which was a few roof tiles, the windows were damaged, and minor damages elsewhere, but the focus was very much on that. And I remember when Peregrine and myself went there, we said, no, there's the obvious termite infestation here, we need to address that. So we went about the process of trying to get them to focus on that, but the focus is very much on window repairs, and also we got involved in doing these survey drawings, which you see there. And then comes Hurricane Melissa. And of course, all this beautiful repair work that had been done to the windows, and all the preparatory work which had been done to repair the termite damage, all came to naught because the hurricane basically took out the central nave of the church. And you can see in the middle photograph that the beautiful repairs to the windows was basically negated. And it really is a very emotional site, because in fact the fact that that tower is still standing, and the fact that that tower is now the tallest structure in Black River, and the fact that Reverend Toller, the day when Julian McMarcy engineer went to go and survey the damage, and Reverend Toller went up to the top of the spire and he rang the church bell. And that was a very poignant statement, I think, that St. John's will rise. And a few of these images basically demonstrate that there is a connection between lack of resilience and vulnerability to this kind of storm. The very reason this church, basically, this roof was over 100 years old. This building had been rebuilt once in its life, and I think in 1907 it got a major upgrade. It survived Hurricane Gilbert, although it didn't lose its main roof structure, but the roof covering was renewed after Gilbert in 1988. But since then, very little in the way of maintenance. And what actually happened was that the roof elements, the timber elements that comprise the roof, because of the termites, were not acting as one, were not acting in unison. And the walls were therefore not able to withstand the combined force of persistent wind and wind gusts. So it's one of the things that we lament, but it's a teachable moment that in fact we need to understand that there is a connection between maintenance and resilience. So I put this in here because the determination in terms of St. John's is that we are going to reconstruct the church. The problem is always finding funds. I wanted to see whether or not this link was going to work, and I don't know if it is. You want to continue? Yes. Let me see whether or not this plays. Doesn't it whether I want? Doesn't appear that it will. What that was going to be Alison Morris playing the organ in that church, but it doesn't look like it has enough bandwidth on the Wi-Fi to play. All right, so I'll move on. So I went back. Let me go back a few slides and just I'd actually put these in slightly the wrong order, because this slide here. That slide there, which talks about impact analysis, what makes recovery, should have been after St. John. So I will now go back to that. Okay. So the first is lessons learned. And that, number one, is take climate shift seriously. So the new reality is that we have unpredictable storm behavior, more frequent major hurricanes, more energy, stronger winds, heavier rain. You can see from the track of Hurricane Melissa, and I mean, I was there, every day we were trying to decide, is this thing going to turn north? Is it going to keep going west? It was just meandering all over the place. And then finally, on the 20th of October, it decided what it was going to do, and all hell broke loose. So the required actions from my point of view are: we need international advocacy, we need global pressure for emissions reductions, we need climate action and local adaptation strategies, we need disaster mitigation, early warning and preparedness, we need a green agenda, and we need to manage carbon. So, from the climate side, we have a lot to do to try and make sure that hurricanes like Melissa do not have the water temperatures, the sea surface temperatures that can basically fuel them. Because that's exactly the reason why Melissa was as strong as Melissa was. It was sitting to the south of Jamaica in some of the hottest waters in the Caribbean for days and days and days, just getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So we need to figure that out. In terms of prevention, Build Back Better. Dollars saved in prevention versus disaster disruption costs. There are many sort of structural elements that are vulnerable, and any one of them will lead to losses, right? I cited a few there. Maintenance is absolutely critical, and my partner Ann Hodges, made a statement in a Vina article the other day that everybody loves their car and maintains it and changes the oil faithfully, but who goes to check whether or not the hurricane straps are there, whether termites are eating out the very components that are keeping their roof on. Very few people seem to do that, and my posture, what I think is that if we did have this discipline and this culture, we would have had fewer losses as a result of the hurricane. Lack of maintenance made heritage damage more extensive. We need retrofitting to preserve future heritage so that when there's a future hurricane, it's not going to do the same thing as Melissa did. In terms of risk reduction, we need to plan for lower risk. We need to identify what the key risk areas are and what the key risk elements are: wind, flooding, storm surge, and landslides. And we need to basically plan for them. Now, one of the things I mentioned about White House was that people very often go and they live on marginal lands or lands that they don't own but are able to build something on. That is so in the hills, but it's also so on the coastline. In Paratee, this is, when people have a 9-foot storm surge coming to a part of the island which is 12 inches above sea level, you know that you are setting up for a disaster. So we have to be careful. But there was a statement that I don't know if it came onto the Prime Minister's office, that there's a concern that Black River, there are talks about whether or not Black River needs to be relocated because it's in if it had been built today, it would not have been built there. But the same is true of Port Antonio and of Falmouth and of Port Moore and Savlamar. So what we have to do, it seems to me, is that we have to, with this massive investment that we have in coastal towns, and the reason why we have so many coastal towns is that many of them were built on the backs of trade, of seaborne trade. In Black River it was logwood and many other things, including slavery, of course. But we need to make our coastal towns resilient. We need to have coastal protections in place. So my thing is not moving Black River from where it is, but in fact putting in the coastal protections to protect Black River. In terms of legislation and communication, obviously, we need better code enforcement. Look, there's no point having, we have very good building codes, but they're not properly enforced. If you approve a building to be built and then you don't check that it's been built the way it was designed, then you're going to end up with vulnerabilities. So in terms of legislation and communication means that you educate people on why they should build in a certain way, and why they should maintain in a certain way as well. How can the diaspora help? Obviously, by donating, to support Jamaica.gov and other verified NGOs. They can invest in Jamaica to support local businesses rebuilding. They can advocate for climate change and international support. And they can connect with projects in Jamaica to try and help in the way that Jamaican Heritage Renewal is doing with us, with the We're Collective. We are working together. Hopefully, we're in the process of discussing whether or not they will assist us in going to the Commonwealth Heritage Forum and getting some funds to do a detailed assessment of heritage in the affected area. Preparing for the next hurricane season. We need, there's immediate help that is needed, there's short-term help, and there's medium-term help. And the government priority is resilient reconstruction, particularly in housing, in climate, coastal defense, and in public utilities. Now, one of the things that is my pet peeve is that, last year after Hurricane Beryl, and we at the We're Collective lost one of our buildings. I'm going to show you in a minute. But the Jamaica Power Company had an enormous job to put back telephone poles in the very area that it had to come again a year later and do the same thing all over again. And somehow or the other, we have to figure out how we're going to build resiliency into things like our power grid. I'm not an electrical engineer, but we have to figure out ways that we can be more resilient in every sector, including that one. I want to talk a little bit about the We're Collective that I'm a director of. It's an NGO that's trying to preserve and protect Jamaica's vernacular built heritage, particularly in the first instance in Manchester and St. Elizabeth. And so we have a project to try and preserve what are called Spanish wall buildings. Spanish wall is a building method that goes all the way back to the days when the Spanish were in Jamaica. It's a building technique that borrows from the Taino, that borrows from the Spanish, that borrows from the Africans. Basically, you build a framework in the ground, just like the Tainos did with their round huts, but they're normally rectangular, and then you infill with limestone in a mortar bed within the frame, and then you basically complete the house that way. And the stone walls basically stiffen the wooden frame. So there are a number of these houses in South St. Elizabeth, and after we reconstructed one in 2023, and in 2024, Hurricane Beryl knocked it down. And we learned an enormous amount from that. We learned that the reason why it had done that was because we were using what was called fallen lime. We were using lime that had basically passed its sell-by date. But what we're doing is building a living museum on a site in South St. Elizabeth to try and preserve these building techniques and other techniques like craft and food and agriculture. The bottom left image there shows in that red swath, that's basically the track that Hurricane Beryl took. But Hurricane Beryl didn't hang around. It basically, she and again, two ladies in a row, and had to stop naming hurricanes after ladies. So that's a little bit about the We're Collective and about what we're trying to do with vernacular heritage. Thankfully, where our site was located in Southfield, which is about 10 miles north of Treasure Beach, was this time not severely impacted in terms of built heritage. Of course, lots of crop loss and livelihood loss. So despite the difficulties, the Jamaican spirit shines through. A quote from UNESCO: UNESCO is fully committed to supporting Jamaica's recovery within its mandate and at every level, from schools to cultural heritage sites. Our teams are working hand in hand with national authorities to ensure that communities can rebuild stronger and more resilient than before. And so basically UNESCO is on my side. UNESCO believes that this is the way that we should proceed. And I hope in fact that as a national effort, this is in fact the way we're going to proceed, not only with our dwelling houses that people have to live in, but also our national heritage. High Commissioner, you mentioned Vale Royal. It's one of the things. The government is fully in charge of Vale Royal and able to restore Vale Royal. So I'm making a personal plea that Vale Royal, there's nothing stopping Vale Royal from being restored and used in some way going forward. I thank you very much. That's all I have to say at the moment. I'm quite happy to take any questions if that is your wish.
Peter, thank you.